Obama administration is beginning to plan an appeal of a major court ruling. A federal judge says the NSA's massive collection of phone call data, brought to light by Edward Snowden, likely violates the Constitution. NBC's Justice correspondent Pete Williams has more on this. Hi, Pete.
Matt, good morning. President Obama will meet today with the leaders of some of the nation's biggest tech companies, and one subject will be leaks about government surveillance programs. They'll be meeting a day after the judge's ruling that one of those programs is unconstitutional. The ruling is a blow to an NSA surveillance program that gathers data about every phone call made in the U.S. and saves it in a massive database to be checked, the government says, when it has a terrorism lead tied to a specific phone number. Civil liberties groups sued, claiming the government needs some indication of wrongdoing before it goes harvesting all that data.
This kind of program, this kind of dragnet program, operates the other way around. It gives the government access to everything on the theory that something somewhere might be relevant.
The ruling departs from a 1979 Supreme Court decision that said people have no expectation of privacy in the records of their phone calls. That notion, said federal judge Richard Leon, has been eclipsed by technological advances and a cell phone-centric lifestyle. Count the phones, the judge said, bus stops, restaurants, everywhere, giving the NSA access to a vast amount of information it couldn't get 3 decades ago. But an expert on the government's search power says the judge might have that wrong.
In some ways, the telephone is a less important technology today than it was in 1979. In 1979, it was such a critical way of people communicating with each other.
One surprise, the ruling comes from a judge appointed by President George W. Bush, whose administration started the phone collection program.
Conservatives these days are also very anti-government and very much anti-big government. And as a result, there's sort of a strange bedfellows between conservatives and liberals on this issue.
Pete, 2 issues here. Let's stick with constitutionality to begin with. This judge basically overruled a Supreme Court decision that you mentioned from 1979, saying that Americans have no expectation of privacy in the records of their phone calls. 15 FISA court judges have upheld the constitutionality of this program. So what are the government's chances of winning on appeal?
Well, they're pretty decent. The Court of Appeals may see this very differently. Remember, this is just one judge's opinion. But it's interesting here, what the critics would say of the FISA court rulings is now, with this judge, you had an adversary process. You had people coming in arguing the other side, which is something the FISA court never heard.
The other side of this is the effectiveness of this program in the first place. Judge Leon said that the government basically didn't present one piece of evidence that shows that this program of collecting all this metadata actually has worked to prevent terrorism.
Well, and that's got to be troubling to the government. What the judge said is he can't find one instance where the immediacy of this, in real time, with speed of the essence, made a difference. He acknowledges there were some cases where it was helpful, but he says it's not one of those things where the heat of the moment paid off. But you know, in the final analysis, the government may change how this works anyway. There's already been a recommendation that the phone companies store all this data, and then the government seek into it when it needs to.
What's the timetable? What's the next step in the process?
Goes to the Court of Appeals. We're months away from that, and it could go to the Supreme Court, too. So the resolution of this finally could be at least a year or a year and a half away.